Welcome to episode 121 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on September 10th, 2024. Today I'm bringing you an interview with Claudia and Malinda of Alchemy Fiber Mill in East Hampton, Massachusetts. You met them a few episodes ago as part of this year's I-91 Shop Hop series. I thought their story was so interesting that I asked them if I could come back and talk to them some more. They are a great pair doing great things for wool growers in this area. Let's get to it. I'm back. I'm refreshed and renewed and kind of unsure what to do with that feeling. I finished off the last semester strong. Yay me. I am not afraid to pat myself on the back now and then when it is warranted. Grad school is a challenge for sure, but I'm really loving it, and I'm grateful to folks for being patient for episodes when I navigate the especially pressing bits of the process. I've been on break for a little over 3 weeks now, with just under 2-ish to go, and it's incredible how my body and mind has responded to that break. I got my final project handed in, and it was like my brain was just like, okay, we're going to shut the door on everything we've been doing and just be for a while. I went on a couple of road trips. Knitting was still there, but it didn't feel as pressing. I just enjoyed it when I had time for it. I've been reading and looking out of windows and just absorbing all the things I haven't had time to give attention to, and it's been really, really nice. But I have also had a few things that I've wanted to do and talk about, and as the semester approaches, I'm going to try to get those either done and out to you all, or at least prepped to the point where I have the recordings done and can edit and release them as I have time for a while. Next episode, for instance, I want to talk about a few museum pieces that I saw on one of my road trips. And today, I want to bring you this interview with Claudia and Malinda of Alchemy Fiber Mill. As I mentioned, you've met these ladies before on the show very recently, as their mill was one of the new additions to the I-91 Shop Hop. But in that interview, we were talking mainly about their intentions for the yarn crawl, and I wanted to get back to see them again and talk to them about how and why they decided to open a fiber mill in this day and age, and what that process was like for them, because I think that along with getting sheep and opening a yarn store, opening a mill is something that I think fiber crafters daydream about from time to time, and it would be helpful to understand what that process is like. So that's what I have for you today. Now, a disclaimer. Recording this episode was a challenge. There was a fire alarm at one point. People were rolling their dumpsters by the door of the mill, and there was I'm sure, a very charming little girl who was enjoying the echo of the hallway outside of the mill. So I was not shocked when I sat down to edit the audio and I found that there was also a technical issue that disappeared the last half of the recording. As much as I would love to be able to do these interviews with several staff members in attendance to handle the tech, that's just not in the cards. So in the meantime, every time these things happen, I do learn a little more. And I have actually prevented some major issues in the past because of these lessons I've learned along the way. So progress is happening. But as with life, there's always something happening and always something new to learn. The audio cut out at a natural transition point in our chat, so it's not the end of the world. And the ladies were good enough to send me a few extra thoughts that disappeared that I'll share with you at the end of the surviving recorded interview. Malinda and Claudia are an amazing team. Alchemy Fiber Mill has already made its presence felt in this area, and they are producing some lovely yarn for small-scale wool and alpaca farmers in the area. Please enjoy this talk with Malinda and Claudia, and I'll have more for you on the other side. Well, ladies, thank you for meeting with me again. After our last talk, I really wanted to come back and talk to you more about the mill and your process in getting started, mainly because it's one of those things that I think a lot of fiber hobbyists see and think, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? I would love to do something like that. And so I really wanted to come and talk to you and find out what it was like to get Alchemy Fiber Mill up off the ground and started, and go through those parts. So Malinda, we're going to start with you today. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me.
Thanks for coming back.
Thanks. What possessed you to start this mill?
For the love of fiber. Honestly, I feel like the pieces of my life and the experiences I've had and the jobs I've had have been building to this. My undergrad was in fiber science. That includes some fiber science, some design classes, and some business management classes.
Okay.
I am a trainer by profession after that. I've worked for nonprofits, government, and corporate and had training roles in all of those.
Okay.
A lot of software things, a lot of tech things, just like all the pieces that you need to make a business go together.
What initially drew you to studying fiber as your undergrad?
Undergrad, yeah. Well, I started out as a chemical engineer.
Okay.
And then decided to change majors, and it was the sort of thing that I have always been interested in fiber. I grew up sewing, crocheting. The knitting came much later, much more recently, but pretty much anything fiber related I could get my hands on, I did. And it's the sort of thing that when you're trying to decide in high school what the heck you want to do, you don't even know that's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
So once I was there and kind of sat down with the big red book and went through every major in there when I knew I wanted to change my major, and was like, that's the one for me.
So you had a scientific background in fiber and design, and you'd worked as a trainer in different capacities. What was the moment when you realized, oh, I have the skills, this might be something I can do?
I went to a knitting retreat at a mini mill, the mini mill where we purchased our equipment. I had already gotten onto the hand spinning bend at that point.
Okay.
And was just starting to cross over into, oh, this is a thing that exists. And even then I was mostly going because there were instructors that I wanted to take classes with. And then during one of the first nights, during one of the dinners, the mill owners kind of talked to us about, here's how we started, here's what the story is. And I just kind of looked around like, I just put that in the back of my mind for a little while.
So when you say a little while, how long are we talking before things really got going? Months or years? Less than a year, okay.
That's just sort of how it worked out.
So what were those first steps to actually put it in action?
I started researching all the other mini mills I could find, looking at the market, asking people in our area who might have occasion to use a mill, find out what the need is. Market research.
Market research.
Yeah. Just consuming as much as I could that was out there. And in the age of social media, I will say that was much easier to do now than it might have been even 5 or so years ago. Like a lot more people are posting process videos and all those sorts of things. So that really helped me. Also went and visited a bunch of mills, made specific trips just to go talk to owners, see what they're doing, various things like that.
Had you decided to go with the Belfast mini mill at that point, or were you sort of keeping your options open?
I was keeping my options open, and there's sort of the difference between are you the kind of person who wants to look at vintage equipment and learn how to fix things that don't have manuals and all the other things, and then there's the side that is equipment that is still in production that might have some tech. The decision was actually kind of made for me, just in the way things played out.
Where you just didn't feel sort of called to that repair side, potential repairs, or?
You know, honestly, I thought I was going to go more that direction.
Okay.
In terms of, not that I have a bunch of hands-on mechanical skills, but I'm picking them up. But my husband is really great at those things.
Okay.
And we were looking at these things together.
Mm-hmm.
So not that he was necessarily going to be my business partner, because he's not. But and that was a conscious decision between the two of us as well.
There's wisdom in that, I
Yeah.
think, yeah. A partner who's willing to help, but
Yes.
has their own job, yeah.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So pretty much the first mill I reached out to was the one I had visited initially at that retreat, because
Okay.
I was going back to their retreat the next year.
Oh,
And I decided to just send them an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, perhaps. Do you have any advice, any recommendations? Are you willing to talk with me?
mm-hmm.
They were like, yeah, sure, let's talk this weekend.
And then from there,
Little did I know.
Yeah.
Little did I know the end of that conversation was going to be, oh, actually, your timing is interesting. We're about to make the reservations to move the equipment because we're retiring.
oh,
Do you
wow.
want to buy the mill?
So backing up, you weren't at Belfast Mini Mills. You didn't buy it directly
No.
from them. You
No.
bought a Belfast Mini Mill from another already established company.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So,
Which was way ahead of
Okay.
schedule, you know? Here I
Yeah.
am thinking I'm making this call to continue my research, and then all of a
Right.
sudden it's happening.
yeah. So, my whole vision of how this happened, I had a lot of assumptions in my head, because I know, I've spoken to other Belfast owners, and they get the mill and they have time with the producers to help them set it up. And did you have that?
So at the time when I was making this decision, will I buy the used equipment? Will I get on the list and just wait because this is too soon? The waiting list was 2 to 3 years
Yeah.
for new equipment. And at that point, I just, all right, the time is now.
Okay.
The fibery future is now.
It is now. Let's get started. Okay, so then what happened? So they're retiring. They have all the mill equipment. Do they just box it up and send it to you in a U-Haul? Like, how does
They
this?
were great. They helped facilitate a lot of it. They had obviously an established relationship with Belfast.
Okay.
And so they helped facilitate arranging with Belfast, which is not necessarily it's not something that has to happen that way, but
Okay.
they knew this was sooner than I planned on. They
Right.
knew it was good for them and good for us, and
Okay.
so they sort of helped arrange that part where the Belfast would be hired separately to go to them to pack everything up,
Okay.
and bring it here and unpack it, and give us training. That was all
Okay.
included in the separate price that we
in all of
paid.
the arrangements for
Yes,
that. Okay.
arrangement.
Okay. So you didn't just open the box and have a little note, good luck, with a heart next to it, you know?
I love that.
So what's next? You have the mill arranged. Where are you going to put it? What do you do next? Because I think
there's
a
a
lot of
question.
people
So many
expect that, they've heard, oh, you can fit it in a 2-car garage.
Well,
you know.
I wouldn't advise it.
So then you have this arrangement fall in your lap faster than you expected, and people are willing to come help you learn, but where are you going to put it?
Similarly, Many decisions ended up being made for us based on the accelerated timeline.
Yeah.
Because everything was accelerated. Initiating the mill coming, all of it. These things all take longer than you think they will. We had a hard time even hearing back from landlord company, like other places I was looking at.
Right.
Various things. So a lot of the decisions we made really came down to timing and who got back to us first, or who treated us the best, or what have you.
Okay, so you ended up in a mill.
We're inside a mill.
Yeah, you're
I
in a
love
mill.
it.
You're in a mill with your
I
mill.
love saying that. We're a mini mill inside a bigger mill with all sorts of good textile juju.
That's right. So this building is a huge old mill that now has been subdivided into apartments and studios and businesses, and you're located here. Do you know what this mill used to do? Was this a fiber mill originally?
It was a cotton mill.
Okay.
Originally, I believe. Honestly, I want to dig into the history of it eventually, but there's only so much time in the day.
I grew up north of here and in a factory town, and when I was a kid there was one factory that was half being used for paper, and all the other factories were empty, and I knew down here all of these factories were empty, so it's such a wonderful thing to still be in the area and see them being used again.
Yeah, definitely.
And the same thing's happening in the Lowell and Lawrence area as well, which was a lot of linen work up there.
Mm-hmm.
You reminded me of another influential factor in this.
Okay.
It was reading Clara Parks's Vanishing Fleece.
That's a wonderful book. For those who aren't familiar, she buys, is it a whole bale?
Mm-hmm,
It's a whole bale of wool, and she separates it into 4, I believe, and goes through the processing of each of those sections, and it's absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
I learned so much about this area and wool from that book that I had no idea about, because again, all of these factories, by the time I came along, all of these factories were empty buildings.
Yeah, and even more recently, I don't know, I made a wrong turn and was turning around and then just did a double take. Like, wait, the old sign you can barely read on that mill building says knitting company. Oh, what was that one about? Yeah.
It's amazing how much history we're just not aware of because there was that break in production, So you have a mill coming to you. You found a space. What happens when you get a mill at your doorstep?
You jump up and down excitedly and maybe go home and cry later.
Okay. Real.
Like, what have I done?
Claudia, maybe we'll talk for a little bit about the setup of the mill. Where do you come into the story of the mill?
After shock and awe and a slight freak out on Malinda's part, I'm sure, and talk about a phone call out of the blue, she was like, well, I've had this opportunity, and we've talked several times during skirting parties with the fiber shed about somebody should be, filling this hole in the production, and everybody has such a hard time getting their fiber handled in this area, and well, I'm buying a mill, and do you want to be my partner? Excuse me? What? And I'm sure it was the same sort of reaction that she had when the offer was made to her about, we're retiring, would you like to purchase our existing business? Yes, like I would like to, but just what did I just commit to?
Right.
So I think it was the same thing, we both had that initial, this would be the best thing to ever happen in the area. We know it's needed. We know that the clients are there. We just have to make the connections. But are we really the people to be doing this? And we are. I mean,
Yeah.
we have proved it again and again that we really are, that our collective history, our love of wool, our love of fiber, our skill as hand spinners, as knitters, as weavers, as communicators, that, you know, I have to say we have some, in our short history, we have some clients who very much love us, and we have shearers who are recommending us to folks that they shear for, saying, hey, did you hear about, you know, and we've processed some of their personal sheep fleeces, so they actually have a knowledge base there. It's not just like, hey, this is easy and expedient, just knock on, you know, just give them a phone call. It's no, they're doing a good job. So use their services.
Excellent. So the mill arrives.
Yes.
You have a place for it.
Yes.
You have people coming to help you.
Yes, because our technician, who we'll give a shout out to, Andrew, we love you. So Andrew pulled up in this very large truck to the loading dock and came in and was just like, okay, well, let's start unloading. And it was just Malinda and I standing there, and Andrew, and he had actually taken everything out of storage, because there was a moment, you have to understand, with Belfast, it's a small family company. They actually have 2 technicians who travel all over the world who do their installations, and they basically, talk about a heart attack. Malinda got a call about 2 months earlier than we were expecting, before 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, it turns out that our schedule, instead of coming at the end of August, we're going to come now at the beginning of June and take the mill. And are you ready for it? And of course, being fairly people-pleasing people, she calls me, and we freaked out for like 5 minutes. We didn't have insurance. We hadn't finalized the loan. We didn't have any place to move it to. So we spun around in circles, and then at the same time we were calling each other. Like I had just hit the little phone on and hers is coming through, and we're like, why are we trying to do this? It's their schedule. We have to just, you know, pull up our big girl pants and say, I'm sorry, I understand this works for your schedule, but we don't have a space yet.
Right.
And they're like, oh, no problem, we'll put it in storage. Nice Canadians that they are. And so they did. They moved it from its former home. They moved it into storage. They put it under their umbrella and insured it for the time that it was in storage. And then they came back to us. And by that time, we had all of the other puzzle pieces figured out. But talk about a panicked morning before 8 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
So when Andrew pulled in with the truck, he had put everything on that truck, and we're looking at these machines, and while it's deemed a mini mill, I'm 6 feet tall, and there's a very few that are shorter than I am. So, you know, they're sizable pieces of equipment.
Yeah, and I will say I was in a mill recently that is not Belfast Mini Mills. They have gone the recycling route, where they've gotten old equipment and brought it in. And yeah, they're not processing millions of pounds a year, but it's quote unquote proper mill equipment from, 60, 80 years ago. Right. And it's not that much bigger than a mini mill. It is still, this equipment you have back here is sizable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you hear it can fit in a 2-car garage, like it can fit in a 2-car garage.
You're not going to process anything because you won't be able to plug everything in and move around it.
You won't be able to move around it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. so Andrew shows up and he's like, well, let's get to it. Mm-hmm. And, the first thing off the truck were the pallet jacks. And honestly, we walked 7 miles that day, according to my pedometer, just from the loading dock into this space. So we just
And you're a
kept,
straight shot in. You're
oh
not,
yeah, it's not horrifically far. It was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and just,
So how long did the setup take then?
Well, as it moved in, Andrew basically laid it out.
Okay.
Now, there had been a lot of deconstruction in our space prior to that, because it had been, there had been another business in here, and there were many more walls in here.
okay.
So much of it was removed at that point in time. And we had sort of sent, I think, a plan and got Andrew's feedback about, oh no, this would be, or was it Jeff?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
The schedule change also changed our technician.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we had sent it to Belfast, and they had said, yeah, it makes sense to, move from this area to this area to this area. So
Okay.
basically day one, it was just getting everything off the truck and getting it into a semblance of where it would end up. And we did that. And then the next morning, we showed up first thing bright and early in the morning, and Andrew was here, and he was like, okay, well, I'm gonna take the picker, and I'm gonna make sure that everything's balanced and everything is set up and everything is working well, and then we'll train you on that. And that's what we'd do. He'd train us on one machine, he'd go to the next machine, make sure it was calibrated, balanced, in the right spot, all the plugs reached where it needed to reach to our outlets. And then he'd go, okay, come over here now. We're gonna work on this one now. And so he would, he just kept 2 steps ahead of us. And by the time we had a week with him, 7 days, I think the only thing we were not able to train was any of our wet area, our washer, because we had plumbing difficulties that we had to sort out that took quite some time.
Is that part of the mini mill, or is that a
Yes.
separate? So that's okay.
Yeah, so all of that was included. And it was just one of those things that he just went one thing after another. And he had told us how much wool to have on hand and how much alpaca to have on hand so that we could train everything. And we luckily have some very dear friends who have quite a depth of fleeces in their stable.
Okay.
And so since we were not able to wash, we were having to pick things that were already pre-washed. So I had a bunch in my stash, and then we had another dear friend who brought things over and Andrew kept going, oh, well, you guys have really good taste, and these are nice. These are really nice. And so by the time he left, I think we had 5 yarns that we had worked with him on, because we wanted to do things like a blend. We wanted to do more difficult bases. We wanted to work with some of the Leicester long wools, because so many shepherds up in our area grow the Leicesters. So we wanted to have a familiarity with the kind of fiber that was going to be crossing our door.
Right.
So we had several recipes, as we call them, by the time he left. But there still was this horrific panic when we said goodbye to him and he drove off, because I'm sure it's what parents of quintuplets feel like when all the help leaves and you're just like, oh my God, really? Why did I think I could do this? And so it was a lot of trial and error. And I will say for myself, I used some of my wool stash and I made some fairly ugly yarn, but I figured it out. I figured, because it's the same equation. When you're standing at our spinner, for us, it's the same equation that we would have sitting at our own wheels. How fast is the spindle speed going to be? How much am I going to draft? And how much twist am I going to put into that yarn? It's the same thing. It just happens a whole lot more quickly.
And that is where the interview involuntarily ended. But I do have more for you. The ladies re-answered via email the 2 biggest questions that were lost, and so I bring you their responses. One thing I was really curious about was, what did they wish they had known before they started the process of opening the mill? And their response was, there are many great small businesses and creative arts resources out there, like your local development center network, or programs like Co-Starters, which is a program that Malinda completed through their local Chamber of Commerce. Don't wait until you need them to find out what they are, how to apply, and how to schedule time with them. And as bonus thought was, keep in mind that getting replies for anything that needs a quote will generally take longer than you plan or expect. I was also curious about what their plans were for the future of the mill, and they replied, we have about 10 phases worth of future plans in our minds. Most immediately, they want to support and grow their local fiber community, build out a dedicated room for classes and gatherings, and start planning some retreats and getaways. They're hopeful that within 5 years, they'll be able to add some more equipment and hire employees. And they're also planning to add more classes, special events, and collaborations as they look to the future. So be sure to keep an eye on them so that you don't miss out on those opportunities. To do that, you can find the mill at alchemyfibermill.com and on social media as Alchemy Fiber Mill. On the website, there is an event tab with a calendar that has all of their events listed. I hope to make it to the next spin-in on the first Saturday in November. Maybe I will see you there. If you'd like to come along, bring your drop spindle or wheel with you and plan to start at about 2:30, but the open spin time goes until 7 p.m., so come along when you can. As I said at the start of the interview, I think opening a mill is something that many of us daydream about to one degree or another, and there are certainly areas of the country with wool producers who would benefit. I think Malinda did a brilliant job of researching the needs of her area and the options available to her so that when the opportunity presented itself, she was able to scramble and recruit Claudia and get things moving. That background experience and information is key to success. If I suddenly had the option to buy a mill and I had jumped at it, it would be a disaster. It's good to remember that just because an opportunity presents itself doesn't mean we're ready to take it on. If you are mill curious, start learning more now and be smart. Thank you again to Malinda and Claudia of Alchemy Fiber Mill. I hope to see you again soon, and I hope those of you in the area go by and get to know them more and support this resource that we have. A few more things before I go. Many thanks to everyone who came out to the Hartford Stitch and Pitch back in August. It was great fun. I enjoyed meeting so many of you. There were maybe 20% of the attendees who heard about the event through their local yarn store, so it was really nice to see all the new faces as well as getting the chance to meet so many listeners. There was quite a bit of interest in the event booth on the concourse too, so hello to anyone who's now listening who heard about the podcast through the event. Will we repeat it? That is absolutely my intention. I need to sit down and plan my 2025 to figure out when, but I will let you know as soon as I can. Also, I'm getting deeper into the weeds of planning an event this winter, and I'll keep you posted. I do hope to have out at least 2 other episodes over the coming weeks. We'll see what happens, but just in case, the next sort of big thing on the horizon is Wovember, which is when we spend the month of November learning about wool and celebrating it for all of its fine qualities. That takes place completely on Instagram, and I have the site lovewovember.com for longer form contributions. If you are not already following me on Instagram, please hop over there and follow I Thought I Knew How so you get all the info about that. I was trying to figure out how to handle the event this year, and I had lunch with Erin of Morehouse Farm the other day, and she just casually dropped a brilliant idea. So more information will be forthcoming about how that will all take shape in a few months' time. Okay, thank you for listening to the end, everyone. I'm off now to get myself ready to move along through the old to-do list. I'll be back with you again soon, I hope. In the meantime, Thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review the show in the app you use to download it, and I'd love it if you'd share the episode with a friend. The show notes are where you will find links to the things mentioned in the show, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How, except on X, where it's just Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.